The Denver Broncos get some important injury news before they clash with the Vegas Raiders on Sunday. There's more evidence that the Raiders culture is imploding upon itself faster than we even thought. And in order to slow build my vitriol for the Las Vegas Raiders, some news dropped today that proves the Chiefs cheat even more than we thought they did, which was a lot. If you're new to the channel, I'm Ben. I'm a diehard Denver Broncos fan. It helps me and the algorithm out a ton if you would like and subscribe. So let's start off with the Chiefs cheating more than we even thought they did. We know that there's a love affair going on with the Kansas City Chiefs from the national media and probably from the NFL as a whole. Maybe it's Taylor Swift related. I don't know what it is, but the amount of calls that the Kansas City Chiefs are getting out of control. And it's one thing to have refs kind of swayed by the Patrick Mahomes effect. We even see Tony Romo when Patrick Mahomes throws a horrible interception into triple coverage for his 35-year-old aging tight end. You still hear Tony Romo be like, "Oh, Jim, just look at that. Look at that. Jim, you don't see quarterbacks make tackles like that," as he's blowing out the ACL of his receiver. So there's this love affair, and they've gotten away with ridiculous stuff like somehow in the red zone letting their defensive coordinator make a timeout call when that should have been a penalty and that should have knocked their drive back. We know that in league history, no quarterback has had more interceptions, a greater percentage of his interceptions nullified by offsides, like a phantom offsides of the defense, as Patrick Mahomes has. If you look at him, 16 of his interceptions, so 0.31% of his interceptions have been called back because the defense was offsides. And I don't picture Mahomes as like being a great hard counter. Like, it makes sense that Aaron Rodgers has two more than him because Aaron Rodgers is famous for the hard count, right? And getting teams off, and that even created controversy with the Jets. But that's not, you can't do a hard count if you sound like Kermit the Frog. And so you see right there, like a cold hard fact right there that like he is getting advantages there. We're just seeing that, on their scoring touchdown, there was an illegal formation that the refs came after, and we're like, oh, we didn't notice that when in that Ravens game. How many times did they call their left tackle for illegal formation, and they didn't even call it the other way? You take a look, you could really spend like you could have a whole channel dedicated to times the Chiefs have cheated, and you look here, a crucial game, and that if that was my quarterback, I would be furious. That is such a late hit. He launches way after Allen had been down, and this isn't a playoff game that really matters. We even just look this year, and you look at how absolutely wild it is that here on a potential game-winning drive for the Falcons, you have their receiver just being tackled in the end zone before the ball even gets there, and that would have given them the ball on the 1-yard line, and they would have lost to the Atlanta Falcons. And you remember one of the reasons they beat the Bengals was because of this bogus pass interference call here. And to me, like, I'm looking at the exact same image here of these things. One time it's called and one time that it's not. So all those are one thing, and I get that refs have a really, really hard job, and I probably sound like a sore loser when I talk about this. But there is something that came out today that goes beyond just refereeing, and it shows how this is like a systemic hold that the Chiefs have over the league, and it's all circulating around this Rashee Rice stuff. That has been super shady, and if you've been following it, like, how long have you been waiting? That injury was almost a week ago, and we still don't know what it is. And he went in for an MRI, and an MRI has like a very clear result, and for whatever reason, we have not heard. And there's been a ton of internet speculation that like, hey, Rashee Rice was the one who was in that hit and run that he fled the scene, and he's going to get a suspension once that all happens. Is that why we're not hearing it? And everyone was like dismissing that as some weird conspiracy theory, like you don't believe in the moon landing or whatever. Well, now you are having actual, very well-established writers like Mike Florio come out and be like, no, that is exactly what is happening. The Kansas City Chiefs are hoping to double dip the Rashee Rice suspension from the league for the hit and run accident he was in with this injury that he had. And so that is why they have been slow playing this whole thing, is that they are hoping that this is a strategic move on their part, that if he has to miss time for his knee injury, he might as well be able to serve the suspension at that time. And that's not how this should work whatsoever. Like the punishment, he should not be able to double dip and do this, but I know because he is a Kansas City Chiefs receiver, they're going to let him do this, and it's going to make me furious. Instead, they should have to play right now without him while he's injured, and when he's healthy, then he serves the suspension. I don't think there's another team in the league that something like this would be able to happen, and I think that's super messed up. I'm not going to stop watching football because I love it, and I think it's going to be even sweeter when the Broncos beat the Chiefs this year, despite having our deck of cards stacked against us. It'll feel even sweeter. Then as far as we got a big game here, moving on from the Chiefs to the task at hand, which is the Vegas Raiders, 8-game losing streak. How are we going to turn that around? I think one of the ways that we're going to turn it around is that we are a team of young and hungry guys who have been working on building a chemistry. That is one of the tightest locker rooms I have seen since I have been watching the Denver Broncos in the 97-98 season. And I think there's so many things that have proved that tightness and that tight bond, and we go over it all the time on this channel. But I don't think you could find the opposite, a better example of the opposite type of locker room than you truly have over in the Vegas Raiders. And the case in point of that is all the stuff that's happening with Davante Adams, that he asked for a trade a week after the head coach, who's a rookie and has no real like street cred with that team yet, comes out and calls out guys for making business decisions. One of my favorite NBA coaches is Mike Malone, and he talks about you have to have a lot of trust built up with players in order to bash them in front of the media, and then you can really only pull that card one time in a season. And to see Antonio Pierce already pulling that card just a few weeks into actually being a head coach shows that the train is off the tracks with the Las Vegas Raiders. And so having your star player be called out for making business decisions and then asking for a trade, and then have your head coach on Instagram like the post asking for a trade, and then make some Instagram posts here that have Edgar Allan Poe alluding to the fact that he wants to go and play for another AFC rival in the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, the quote, "the Raven nevermore," Edgar Allan Poe from Baltimore, I believe, and then obviously wrote The Raven. But man, this is just not the kind of stuff you want players to be thinking about before they are coming into Denver and our raucous environment and the streak truly breaking. On top of that, as you have a coach come out and demand accountability of his players, who then is announced by the NCAA that he is going to be facing violations that could last for 8 years because of his violations with the NCAA. I just don't think that's, here it is right here, in arriving at an 8-year show cause order for Antonio Pierce, that he was the ringleader in orchestrating recruiting violations. So to demand accountability and not making business decisions with your players the same exact week that you're getting notice from the NCAA that you were the ringleader of recruiting violations, I just think that this is an example of the Raiders made a bad move here in giving that job to Antonio Pierce. We broke it down when it happened that very rarely do you have an interim coach who steps up and coaches the rest of the year and goes on to do great things. Usually they are, the players love them because they're easier than the coach they came from, and they play hard for them, and then the train falls off the tracks, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing with the Vegas Raiders. Injury news, it is going to be, I think this is a must-win game for the Broncos if we want to make the playoffs, and obviously mathematically it's not a must-win. Things could happen, but I think culturally this is the easiest game we've had all season long. The energy and excitement around Broncos is at its peak right now over the past, 6-7 years. And I just think if you're going to be a playoff team, you got to beat teams that you're supposed to beat, especially when they're down their best offensive player in Davante Adams. They're also going to be missing their starting running back, who is doubtful and was almost ruled out today. And then you got Max Crosby dealing with an ankle injury. Does not look like he will miss. Sean Payton made a point of coming out and saying that, he's been burned in the past by planning on a player not being there and then them being activated and actually running shop. And his example of that was one of the times he had to play against DeMarcus Ware and they weren't planning to play him. And then DeMarcus Ware showed up and wrecked their offense. And so I don't think the Broncos are doing this. They are planning for Max Crosby to be there and to be healthy. But I think it is, and here's the latest story. He's expected to return, although it will be a game time decision. But man, looks pretty good here with this like little Steph Curry Euro step here. So we need Quinn Meinerz at his game. We need Garrett Bowles at his game. We need Alex Palczewski to step up, and I'm feeling very good about the direction this Broncos team is going. I think we win this game. We boat race the Raiders, and we are on to the playoffs, and that's something we can all believe in.